Welcome back to another episode of the Sharon Jesus podcast. We are your hosts, the Sharon Jesus staff. I guess that'll work. Anyways.
Those on YouTube, how you doing?
So I pulled this hoodie out of the closet, and I realized I've worked for 3 out of the 5 major news outlets. Nice. I've worked for NBC, CBS, and ABC. Nice. Haven't worked for Fox or CNN. So it made me start to think, what was my favorite previous job I've had outside of, church work? Because this is the favorite job I've ever held, obviously. I love this.
We love that you love it.
My question is, what is your favorite job that you've had previous to the ministry, and what was the goal of you having that job? Like for me, is just to have a stable income. That was the reason I had, the job at Channel 7 and the job at Channel 5 when I was in Louisiana. That was really the goal. It wasn't to climb a corporate ladder.
Oh, this needs to be a 2-part question.
All right, so what was your favorite job?
Favorite job and least favorite job.
Sure, we can do that. My least favorite is probably working as a referee for soccer.
What did you not like about it?
The parents. They're the worst. I had to kick a parent out of a U9 game. They thought it was a World Cup.
I had to do that in an Upward basketball game, and Upward is supposed to be a Christian league.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be. We were coaching Harrison's soccer team one time. We had this, it was like introductory soccer. So it was like kick the ball towards the goal. There's no, it's herd ball, right? And like this girl did not want to play. So each kid had to have the allotted amount of time to play, kind of like Upwards, but it was put on by the city. This girl plays her allotted time in the first half. She plays 0 in the second half because she refused to go back in after the second half. I'm like, you got to go back in. She's just sitting there picking flowers. Game finishes. Dad walks across the field and is steaming mad, which I should have known he was going to be that guy when he was videotaping our practices. Yep, videotaping practices. So he comes across, and I'm like, dude, she doesn't want to play. Find something she wants to do, not something you want her to do. They never came back. Mm-hmm. It was terrible.
I was coaching a girls' basketball team. We'll get to the jobs in just a second, but she came to me, and it was first and second graders. She said, Coach, it's all over me. I said, what? She said, sweat.
That's pretty funny.
So, favorite and least favorite job, what y'all got?
Oh, I'm going to say probably the first job I got on my own was it's no longer in business, Missouri Oak Chair and Table. We made dining room furniture out of solid oak furniture.
This is your favorite.
Oh, I loved it. I was 16, and I worked after school. I would leave after school and go and work until 10, 11 o'clock at night, come home, try and do homework, and then worked on Saturdays. But I did the finishing process on the tables once they were made. We did the last coat of urethane, and then did deliveries for the company, that sort of thing. Got to deliver a dining room set to Bo Jackson while he was playing with the Kansas City Royals at that time. So I went to his house and delivered his home furniture. It was awesome. I love that job. No, because he was not in town. The Royals were gone on a road trip, but his wife was awesome. It was really cool. But that was a fun job because it was my first job at 16. It was to buy my own gas.
Yep.
Have fun, do that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. I wasn't thinking about responsibilities beyond that. It was just, hey, I just need to make money. So
I get that.
That was my favorite job. My least favorite job was working for Pinnacle Point Behavioral Health Systems here in Little Rock, and working at it's the alternative school for North Little Rock and Little Rock School Districts, Pulaski County Special School District. We had kids from all over. A lot of hurt, a lot of trauma. Did a lot of trauma-based therapy with kids. It was going to school, going and work every day at the Alternative Learning Center, and essentially breaking up fights all the time, getting cussed out on the regular, breaking up fights. I've been punched in the face, kicked, assaulted, spit on, bit, all of it. It was terrible. You wake up every day and you're like, well, I'm going to go make some money.
Yeah.
I mean, it is brutal.
That's
it was
redeeming.
brutal. Yeah, I hated that job.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
My least favorite, well, let me start with my favorite. And I was sitting here, it's kind of a tie. Both of them were outside, and both of them were me working for myself. I did little handyman jobs, stuff I could handle. I'd run into stuff I couldn't handle, and then I'm scouring for help. And then that was in both these were in Wells, Texas. Another one, the church paid me a full-time salary, but basically it made ends meet, and I had nothing extra. And so if I wanted anything extra, I had to work, and they didn't mind. Is church of about on Sunday morning worship about 120, and but the other part of it was a church member said, "Hey, will you bale hay for me?" And it sounds like hot and awful, but I enjoyed being outside. I still do. In my 20s, I mean, I was bulletproof. Grab anything, do anything. But enjoyed those two kind of extra side jobs. My least favorite job was my full-time employment while being bivocational, and it was 3 years working at the sawmill that I often refer to. Worked my way up even. I became log yard foreman, started as assistant log scaler, just measuring the logs that came in on the trucks. And it was just, I don't know if it was the time period or the environment, but it was like that. I'm just trying to earn a living. God taught me so much about waiting and being patient, and I was having trouble. I was working so much, I was having trouble feeding myself spiritually. So because of time, I didn't know how to, I was just growing and trying to figure it out.
Well, I'd say probably my favorite. I've got two that, dude, it's hard to pick between the two of them. The first one was, it was several years ago. I was in the agricultural field. Long story short, we created a piece of machinery that took core samples in a field more efficiently than the way they were doing it. The way they were doing it was just drive out into the field, take a few core samples, dump it in a bag, and send that single bag off to whatever lab to test their soil. And then they would just use kind of based off that one little spot, well, this is what our field is made up of. But through the years, you come to realize and figure out that one field can have 7 different soil types. And so this piece of machinery was pulled behind a tractor that was driven by GPS on these 2.5 acre grids.
Cool.
And literally all the tractor driver had to do was document, because his bag would sit in this little holder, and the machine would run over a 2.5 acre grid, and it would air shoot the dirt from the machine into that bag. And once he crossed line, he would pull bag and put another one, and then label the grid number there. And so you could have.
What part of this were you doing?
I was I can't really remember the title. More or less, I had a crew of like 3 tractor drivers, 2 scouts, and a guy that handled the business, meeting farmers, taking reports back to farmers and back to the seed companies and stuff like that.
Just tell them like how to fertilize and stuff.
Yeah, like this. So this graph would show them, and it was a very in-depth graph. It would show them where not to hey, don't touch your field here, The soil's great. Hey, you need to do a little extra work over here. Hey, use this chemical in this area and that chemical over here, but don't cross them.
Wow.
The idea was to get them the biggest yield out of their harvest as possible.
Wow.
That's interesting.
That's cool.
And so there's that one, and then the job that I just left to come full time here at TNS, I was the ceramic shop foreman, I guess you would say. We did a lot of work with machining and with Coors Tech and doing CNC machines and lathes and mills and stuff like that. But I got to program, tell the machine, hey, I need you to do this, and then write the program out, and then you watch it make the part that I just told it to make.
Yeah, I've seen,
That's
I've seen
cool.
videos of that.
I've got videos on my phone of it in action. It's one of those things that once you get into it and you get past the helper stage, I'm helping this guy, helping that guy, helping this guy, and you actually get to a machine and actually start writing and telling, hey, this is what needs to be done. And then all of a sudden the machine takes off and it creates
That's cool.
what you just told it to create.
So what job have you hated?
Heating and air.
No hesitation.
When I graduated,
hesitation.
I went into a short period of time of doing excavating with Scotty Nally, and then I went to B.R. McGinty and got my degree. I actually have my license in HVAC and all that. I don't tell anybody that. So if anybody's listening or watching, I don't have gauges, don't have any of that stuff. I don't touch it. I try my hardest not to tell folks because come summertime and the wintertime, phone's blowing up. I can't get my unit to work.
Yep.
Well, I'm sorry. Technically, I don't work for a company, so I can't go into Sanders Supply and get the new Freon because you have to work for a company. They don't just hand it out to Joe Blow anymore like they used to.
And you don't have any gauges.
But heating and air,
Yeah.
dude, you're in the attics in the middle of summer. You're under houses in the middle of winter when it's damp and wet and cold. Worst experience I ever had. We're working this house in Sherwood. And, it was 100. It was that year. It was like 110, 112 here in Arkansas. In the attic, it was like 140 degrees. You could only work like 10 minutes at a time, and they were forcing you to come back out to get fresh air. And then you'd go up, and you'd work another 10 minutes, and then you'd have to. It was the most miserable 2 weeks, because that's how long it took at this one house.
Wow.
Was 2 weeks just to replace the furnace and some ductwork.
That's terrible.
I got out of that job and that line of work pretty quick.
Oh, yeah.
Figured out this is for skinny folks. This ain't for big boys.
So with all these, everyone's favorite job, we had something that, we had our job that we had to do. But what was your personal goal in doing that job? For me, it was to make money for a living, support me and my wife. But personally, selfishly, not selfishly, but I wanted to be the most creative I could be in that field and have the best looking show that I could. So I think.
Yeah, I think he and I kind of already stated it. And if you're just listening, I pointed to Brother Kyle. That job, we were just drawing a paycheck at the one we didn't like.
Yeah. It was.
So there wasn't a higher goal?
Oh, no.
Well, the ultimate goal was we moved here, and it was. I think there were a couple of things that played into us not being able to find jobs. One, we kept our New Mexico area code, which is 505. Little Rock's area code is 501. So I think when people called us back for our job applications, Ashley and I both, I think they were down at 501 instead of 505. And so I think so I only got that job because a friend of mine happened to work for Pinnacle Point. And he was part of the hiring process. So he put me, he knew I had some counseling degree and some background and that sort of thing. And so once I got in there and I'm doing that job, so you ask about goals, I developed the goals some of these kids, and again, we were working kindergarten through seniors in high school. My goal was a lot of these kids didn't have a dad. And so they needed a positive male role figure who could help them get above and out of the situations that they had found themselves in. Now, there's only so much I could do.
Yeah.
One success story, which is actually a failure, maybe, I don't know. We had a girl that, coming out of the Alternative Learning Center, I poured into this young lady, and we got her to a place where she actually applied to college, which had never happened. She ended up being awarded some scholarships from Tulsa University to go to their nursing degree program. And so I was very proud of that, of what we were able to accomplish with this young lady. Unfortunately, the circumstances in which she was raised and was being raised, she ultimately walked away from all that. She said straight to my face, I'll never forget, I'm just going to get pregnant and live off the system. So
That's all she knew.
that's all she knew.
Yeah.
Because that's what she had seen her mom go through. I mean, so these kids have seen, I would go and make home visits for some of these kids. There was one girl I couldn't see like 4 or 5 times one summer because there was a body in the street because somebody had been murdered on her street. And that's what she woke up to every day. I just saw it 4 times that summer, but this is their reality.
Yeah.
I had kids who, a majority of them, their dad was in prison, dad was dead, uncle had been shot. That was their reality. So for me, I was a stranger in a strange land. So my goal was they just need a positive male role figure. And if I can do that every day and put up with getting cussed out, getting spit on, getting beat, getting cut, all of those things, that was my goal.
I think that's important.
And
yeah.
I really didn't have too many lofty goals at the sawmill, but I did have one opportunity in those 3 years. I got to lead one truck driver to the Lord.
Nice.
They would come in, they would sit in this little break room area while they were being unloaded. And I'd tried a few other times to share the gospel with different ones up there, and it was I think antagonistic was too strong of a word, but it was there was a lot of walls, difficulties, hurdles, whatever synonym you want to throw out there. But that made it worthwhile for that 3 years.
Yeah, the only goal I had at doing heating and air was survive.
Yeah.
Survive. Don't get snake bit. Don't get bit by a spider. Don't let a unit fall on you and crush you.
Right.
Yep.
Just for
Like,
our listeners,
just
DJ
survive.
does not like spiders.
No, I'll hurt me, you, and anybody else trying to get away. But at TNS, I think my biggest goal was I wanted to be at the top.
Climb the corporate ladder.
Yep, I wanted to be at the top.
Yep.
And I had started at the bottom and was making my way. And
That's
then, all those jobs, though,
Something you were interested in, sounds
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
very, very much so.
So I think, this is a really good, I asked you about your favorite jobs and your goals in those jobs to kind of set up, what we kind of want to talk about, or what I think I want to talk about is not necessarily, a religious conversation, but it is an important life situation. That rhymed. The importance of having goals, because I think, if you go through life without a goal, without a purpose, you're just kind of walking in circles. You can become better, but what is something you're working towards? And so, you take, our goal as Christians is to be Christ-like. The goal is the mark that Christ has set. And so I think that's a big goal in the life of a Christian. But, if you think outside of your Christian walk, what are some goals that you have? For me, my goal is to be able to do, this sounds so stupid, but I've been trying to train to run a 5K by Thanksgiving. I've got 25 days, and I'm worried. But it's a goal I set because I wanted to do it. I want to be able to do it. You know, goals to become stronger, faster, be more fit, so I can live a healthy, long lifestyle. So I think that's a long-term goal. But what are y'all's thoughts on like the importance of having a goal? Maybe some wise words of wisdom for the young gun or the listeners or watchers.
Well, I think when I was single and living for myself, my goals were different than what they are now. As a father, as a husband, my goals moving forward are way different than when I was in, my teens or my 20s. But I think for me, my biggest goal is to leave a positive imprint on my kids where they don't experience the things that I experienced as a kid, and that they're not left paying for the sins of their father. I know they got really deep really, really quick, but and this is something I think, well, I'll speak for myself. This is something that I struggle with because of my past, but I try to get better every day, do better, and that's my ultimate goal.
Would you say that you know what you experienced, and I kind of have some first cousin thoughts about related ideas about some things I saw, and I wanted to do things different.
Yeah.
So I think you and I have talked about that before.
Yeah, like here's something so simple. It broke me, I guess, not too long ago. This happened. Samson, my guitar right now is out of commission. One of the screws is busted and won't tune properly, so I've got it sitting in the corner, just leaned up against the dresser where the wall in the corner meets. And Samson likes to come up and strum it. We had a toy or something big and clunky in his hand, and he strummed it across it, and I reacted like harshly. I was like, "Hey, don't touch that!" And he started crying because I scared him, and it upset him. I was extremely aggressive, and then I just broke down. I looked up at my wife, and she looked at me, and she was like, "What?" And I just kind of broke down, and I was like, "Dude, I experienced the exact same thing when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. My dad had a guitar, and we all knew as kids, don't touch the guitar.
Right.
Or he was coming undone. And when you would touch it, he was extremely aggressive. It would be this outburst of kind of anger, no explaining why not to touch it. And so it's things like that. Like I caught it, and I heard it, and I replayed what I experienced as a kid. Now he comes by it and just strums it, and I'm like, whatever. Right. If he knocks it over, then I'll eventually replace it or buy a new one or something like that. It's a materialistic thing. It's nothing to like jump on somebody or freak out a kid over,
Yeah.
And so it's like stuff like that. I don't want my kids to experience what I experienced as a child.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So that's my goal.
And that's you've got family goals, spiritual goals, financial goals.
Yeah.
Health goals. Those are good. Kyle, what you got?
Well, I think one of the things that a lot of people, and this is going to go a different direction, but it's more the how do you get there kind of deal. Whereas a lot of people go, okay, so we'll take Parker's example. I want to run a 5K. Most people in their minds go, all right, I'll go out and run a 5K, right? And what you've got to do is you got to break your goal down. And a friend of mine, he does a goal class and goal seminar. And what he says is, take your goal. If your goal is way out here and it's run a 5K, okay, so what is that? 3.1 miles, okay? So in order to run 3.1 miles, I need to be able to run 2.5 miles. What does that look like? Can I run 2.5 miles? Okay, well, if I can't run 2.5 miles, can I run 2 miles? If I can't run 2 miles, can I run 1.5 miles? If I can't run 1.5 miles, can I run a mile? Okay, so I need to start by just running a mile. Get used to that. Get comfortable in that. Now push towards 1.5 miles. Now push towards, and you got to reverse engineer your goal almost so that you are building up towards it. Because a lot of people give up on their goals because they're out here and they don't see all of the little steps that it takes to get there.
And to celebrate those little
goals. So for instance, whenever I started running back in the day, I had no intention whatsoever to ever run a marathon.
Yep.
Right? I was just running to run. Our college ministry was going to a trip in China for a mission trip, and he had all of his adults back out. So I had an 8-week notice to get ready.
Like a line off Forrest Gump. I'm just running.
I know. I was.
Yeah, the first thing I thought about when you said that was, what does the Bible say about people that run?
Yeah, we know that joke.
Yes, absolutely. So I had 8 weeks to get ready for this mountain climbing mission trip in the eastern Himalayas. And so I just started running because I was like, I got to get cardio up and running. So I just started running, and then I fell in love with it. And so when I got back, I was like, well, why am I doing this? What's going on? So I thought, well, might as well run a marathon. That's about the dumbest thing you can do. So I started training, and we had in our church world-class athletes that are triathletes and marathoners, and so I started hanging out with those guys. You start picking their brains. So you find people that have done what you've done, and then you start asking them, what does running 3 miles look like? What does running 20 miles look like? What does running a marathon look like? And it was great. Got a buddy by the name of Jeff Melvin, and I worked with him a lot. And one of the things that he said, Kyle, you need to understand this. Marathon is 2 races. It's a 20-mile race and a 6-mile race. He said 85% of the people who quit a marathon quit at mile 22, which I thought was pretty interesting. You've run most of the way and then you quit. He said, so when you get to mile 22, you need to tell yourself mentally, because 90% of it is mental, 10% is physical. We all could run a marathon. Physically, we can do it, right? Mentally,
I promise you.
Mentally, we can't because we're telling ourselves, no, there's no way. So Jeff, in working with me, said most people quit mile 22. What you need to do is whenever you get to mile 22 and you start struggling, convince yourself, I already ran 20. Mm-hmm. If I ran 20, I can run 6. And it was surprising whenever I got to 20. When I got to mile 20, my very first marathon, I will always remember this. I got to mile 20, and I said, I've only got 6 more miles. I'm in a 6-mile race. I had just run 20. But I just kept saying to myself, I've only got 6 miles. I've already run 20. I can run 6. Yep. A lot of people to give up because they don't ever break those goals down. I'm not going to run 3 miles today, but what does running a mile look like? What does running 2 miles look like? And then you build up to it. And so you've got to put in those little steps.
Well, and I want to say something on that because you were talking about reverse engineering your goal and taking the small steps to get to that big leap. Because a lot of people, they set a goal, like we're sitting here talking about, they set a goal and they see that, and then they start here and it doesn't turn out what they're seeing, and they quit. That's what we're talking about.
That's exactly right.
Like me with photography, I picked it up when COVID started, got heavy into it, looking at all the editing and how to take photos, dealing with the
aperture.
Yeah, the aperture and the lighting and all that stuff. And so I start taking photos and editing my own photos, and they're not turning out anything like what I'm looking at. Mm-hmm. And so after several months of being frustrated, I gave up. I was like, I can't do this.
Right.
I want to do that. I don't want to do what I'm doing right now.
Right.
But something you said, it made me think of how many of our goals need to be present in the process.
Right.
Just be present in the process.
Mm-hmm.
Even like that, even translate into our walk with Christ. We see where we're starting and we see where the finish line is, but we want to go from point A to point B now.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Just be present in the process. It's like a seed in soil.
Well, and we've got to
Just because you don't see anything happening above ground, that seed is still in a process below the soil, growing and taking root, so that when it does break through, it's got a good foundation.
Yeah,
Right.
That was our verse, or one of the verses this morning that we were in, Galatians 6:9. Let us not grow weary in doing good.
That's right.
For in due season we'll reap.
Right.
If we faint not or don't lose heart, depending on what
Right.
version you're reading.
Right. Just be present in the
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
part of that process. My buddy Jim, he was in the military, and one of the things that he used to always say to me and the boys, I apologize, was embrace the suck.
Yep.
Because it's not going to. You're not. I'm not going to. I didn't step out of my house the first day and run 26 miles.
Right.
We had a loop in our neighborhood. It was 2.2 miles from my doorstep all the way around that loop back to my doorstep. That's where I started. And I walked a couple times, not going to lie, the first day. Then I got to where I could run 26 miles without stopping. But it took years to get there. So part of embracing the suck, in the last couple of years, I've dealt with chronic plantar fasciitis, where just walking hurts. Then I got COVID. And since I got COVID, I can't run. I went from running marathons to right now I can barely run 2 miles because of my lung capacity since COVID. And that is frustrating to me.
Yeah.
Physically, I feel great. I feel like I look great, but inside of me, I can go work out. I can get on a treadmill because it's easier on my plantar fasciitis to run on the treadmill than it is to run outside. I'd rather be outside, and I can get 2 miles, and I'm done because I don't have the lung capacity that I used to have, and I can trace it all back to COVID.
Yep.
So I have to embrace that, and I did 2 miles today.
A fella say it a little bit more softer. He said, "Get comfortable being uncomfortable."
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's like a new dad. What do you tell him at the beginning?
Good luck.
When he's struggling, if he's nervous, hey, I don't know if I'm going to be a good dad or this or that. What's usually the response? Most people say, hey, you're going to be a great dad.
Right.
Not you are a great dad. You're going to be.
Right.
It's like the process of fatherhood. You don't just have a kid and all of a sudden you're a great dad. You got to figure it out.
You got to figure it out.
You got to work through your own stuff to make sure that doesn't cast.
And graduate 18 years later.
Yeah.
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 They do. and you
I
do.
don't.
Right.
I'm not sure that when they graduated, I graduated. I
Listen,
think I'm still
Harper's
trying
brought some homework home
Happens.
that's like, Dad, I need to figure out this math problem. And so I figured it out the way I was taught.
You mean the old math?
Yeah, to
Not
do
this
math.
new math.
And she's like,
Not
all right,
this
thanks. Well,
Common
then
Core math.
she brings
Yeah.
it back home, and there's an X through it, like, hey, this is incorrect. And I'm like, that's not incorrect. And she's
Right.
like, well, you got to use all these squares and circles and things to.
No, you
I'm-
don't.
I'm like,
Common
what?
Core math.
Common Core.
Wow.
So,
They made
messed
Dad
up.
dumb now.
you want to know what's crazy? Believe it or not, all three of you, whoopsies, just answered all of my questions with me just sending you one. Second question was importance of having goals. We answered that one. How to set short and long-term goals. You answered that, Kyle. How to deal if you fail with one of your goals. Y'all have answered all three of those.
Some quick tips also on goal setting is
Let's hear it.
I found is write them down and short and long term, and also bring somebody else into the equation. If you make your goal public, you're going to have more motivation in accomplishing that. It could be public in a social media post. It could be public by stating it to your spouse, and they hold you accountable. And when you have that in there, And also the same way as breaking all this down, people set goals for reading the Bible. People set goals for I don't know how to lead somebody to the Lord. People set goals for finances. Well, make that goal public, whether, again, you big time public or family public. But it tends to hold you accountable.
Yep.
I think there's this TV show I used to watch called SWAT, and talking about the process.
The old SWAT or the new SWAT?
It's the same show, just different time period.
Daniel
But
Harrelson?
it is Daniel Harrison's the one I watch, but he has a comment in a lot of episodes that was even in the original, and he says, "Stay liquid."
Stay liquid.
And somebody's like, "What does that even mean?" You just got to go with the flow. Just stay liquid. Just whatever's thrown at you, just go with it. And that's be in the process.
Right.
Just go with it. I mean, you're not going to have a perfect process. You're not going to have a perfect outcome. And a lot of times what you think is going to be at the end, it's not at the end.
Right.
It's not at the end.
Another important factor on goals, real quick, is the importance of having goals. If you aim at nothing, you'll hit it every time.
And with that, episode Not Too Sure has come to a close. Thank you so much for listening or watching. Y'all have a great rest of your day.
Love you guys.